he went on to say in our discussion, well, aren't the Jersey people very angry about this? And as I tried to explain, the truth is our situation is very, very different to Great Britain, and I'm hoping that's something that we will discuss, that we are truly different, not only in our, in our tax system and the way we live, but we are not under a UK government, and we're not suffering the same feelings as they do. I mean, the whole piece was not only St Helier on fire, and if you have time, do have a look at the books on the rug, in that this was in the context of having a go at the royal family, also looking at the Iraq War, also looking at the hatred of Range Rovers. I mean, there were all sorts of things that were in there, looking at William Morris, and some very positive things as well, but this feeling of blame was something that he felt was very English. I mean, as in much contemporary art, it was supported by a very, very good film, and there was a steel band who were playing David Bowie's The Man That Sold the World, and it did hold together as a very strong piece. And I was saying to Rod, I was chatting with the Minister for Culture for the Mayor of London, who was also holding the same little pink book on the EasyJet flight home, and she said, well, it was my favourite piece. And this is going to be in Venice until November, and it then tours Bristol, Margate, London. It will be seen by the world, and it's quite easy to dismiss it as just art, but I think all of you here don't quite feel the same about that. And it is, what is art if it's not emotion? And it really is, it is incredibly important. So that's my kind of summing up for Jeremy Deller.
Thanks very much, Sasha. Maybe we could turn to Senator Sir Philip and ask that question. To what extent does it really matter that Jersey is depicted in a work of art, which is, after all, a construct from an artist? Is that something that, when we think of ourselves on the international stage, we should be concerned about?
Thank you, Rod. I can remember when George Ritchie was first appointed as director of the Art Centre. One of the first things he said to me was that all art was anarchical, and I don't think I agree with that. But at the same time, art is the expression of the artist's views, and sometimes the artist's political views, and people obviously must be free to express their views, whether in art or indeed in any other way. So to answer Rod's question, am I concerned about the picture at the Biennale? I think the short answer is no. I think I take the view that it's a legitimate expression of the artist's views. I don't agree with him. I think he's quite wrong. I don't think St Helier will be in flames in 2017. I don't think people will be rising up in anger to overthrow the government of Jersey. But it does emphasize, I think, a message which is important, which perhaps we ought to concentrate on in the more positive sense, and that is the capacity of art to serve the purposes of the island in a very positive way. And since I've had responsibility for external relations, I and my department have been very much involved, both with the museum and with Rod and indeed with others, in seeking to show off what the island has to offer to visiting High Commissioners and ambassadors and indeed other visitors. And I can remember that one of the ambassadors, I think it was from Sweden, was absolutely bowled over by the mound of coins which were on display in the museum for a period of time. And she left the island with a very positive impression of a place that was not a tax haven actually, but a place which was full of culture, full of life, full of interesting things. And she would go back to Stockholm and say very positive things about us. So to the extent that we can use art in the interests of the island, I hope that we will do so. Want me to pass it on to Rod?
Thank you. How do you pick apart all of that sort of stuff? From my perspective, I was last Saturday, I was at the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition, and equally then I moved on to the portrait exhibition at the BPP at the National Portrait Gallery. And I was quite amazed going back to the Royal Academy exhibition, watching somebody discussing Emily Allchurch's, who's a local girl, work of art, and they were slowly picking it apart and getting it completely wrong. And I think it's interesting what Sasha was saying before, that the artist himself doesn't really understand his own concept. He's just created an image to be provocative, and I think I'm not sure of the anarchic thing, but I think provocation is where all artists' truth lies. They're there to provoke thought and provoke new ideas and to see the world differently. And looking at the Emily Allchurch photo montage, and they said, oh, it's amazing, it's a painting, and it's not backlit, and it's this and it's that, and everything they said was wrong. And I think one of the problems we have is, and this is highlighted by this discussion, is to see everything from this particular perspective, in that if you only have a hammer, you see every problem as a nail. We're looking at it from the Jersey perspective and being offended by this. I don't think it's particularly how the rest of the world sees it. They'll look at the word St. Helier and they'll go, where is that? I support what Philip's saying. They'll go and find it on a map if they're really that interested, and they may even be interested to come over and see this burning artifice. But of course it's not true, and most of art in that sort of way is an edifice. It's not truthful. So I think it's a provocation. I think he's put that up as a provocation. I think he's there to engender his own notion of who he is rather than what we are. And I don't think we need to get too precious about it. I think it's there. And if somebody has some argument for us, then we're here to argue it back. So I'm not concerned about it at all. I think it's really, really good that we suddenly find ourselves on the world stage in that sort of context. Does that make sense? Cool. Who's next? Rob?
The good thing about passing the microphone around is it gives you a chance to think, doesn't it, before the editor actually arrives. Tom Dingle, I'd like to ask you, from the perspective of the Arts Trust, just to perhaps to develop something which emerged from those last two comments. The Arts Trust has been quoted as saying that perhaps we might in the future look at having a presence ourselves at the Venice Biennale or other similar events, precisely in order to project an impression of ourselves culturally. To what extent do you think that's important? In other words, not so much just being the victim of other people's cultural thoughts, but actually, to some extent, dictating the agenda ourselves?
Well, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. It's an important opportunity. And by the very nature of the fact that we're sat here talking about Jeremy Deller, positive images can be talked about elsewhere. And sometimes small jurisdictions can have an impact on a much bigger level than they perhaps are perceived in the everyday life. And I think it's not only important for Jersey to embrace its international identity and to counteract some of the easy stereotypes about tax havens and about child abuse or anything else that people might fling at us. It's not just about a PR exercise, but for our own cultural existence, it's important to embrace the international stage in any case, because Jersey is somewhere where it is a small island. There are a limited number of people here, and actually to embrace other cultures and to have people come in and going out and have more of a thoroughfare of work and artists and ideas can only enrich our experience here anyway. So I do think it's an opportunity for us to showcase about what we are. I also think it's an opportunity for us to learn about other cultures and have a wider discussion. The general principle of engaging with others culturally is something that is appreciated all around the world. You only need to look at Britain's own British Council, the Confucius Institute for China and other such institutes, that it's a very important thing. It's part of humanity, it's part of soft power, it's part of promoting peace and ideas. So I think Jersey, in its own way, I mean, I'm not necessarily suggesting that we are the same as China, but I think we should embrace this as part of being a nation state.
going to ask for some general comments in a moment, but John, I think the microphone hasn't come to you yet, but it's on the way. I suppose one question which kind of emerges from all of this is, and Tom referred to a PR exercise, is the extent to which the message, as it were, becomes, or the art becomes tarnished if the message is too evident. I mean, do you think that there's a useful distinction to be made between cultural diplomacy on the one hand in the positive sense and a PR exercise which clearly is capable of being perceived rather negatively?
Thanks. Well, there's definitely a difference between culture and propaganda, so I think it's a good issue to talk about. And I think that maybe the first thing to say really is not so much what the Jeremy Deller piece says about Jersey, but what it says about Britain. It's part of the British Pavilion. And as Sasha said, I mean, from what I've been able to glean on the internet, which is very well informed, it was a show which included some angry swipes at other British institutions, wealth generally, the royal family, Tony Blair, Iran. So I think the question is, what does that say about Britain, that in selecting an artist to represent British culture, that Britain and the commissioning agents were confident enough to have something so angry? And it makes you wonder if we did have a slot in the and we commissioned some work, would we be that confident? Would we be able to do that? Would we want culture to do that job for us, or would we try to steer it? I think what happened really with that specific St Helier reference is really just partly a reaction to how incredibly successful Jersey has been in promoting itself as a centre for business for the last decade or two, or maybe three. When the Island looked at branding 8 or 9 years ago, I remember being told that there was too much heritage in the brand. It wasn't conducive to the international connectivity that we needed to develop business. I think that's been a very successful approach, but I think that to an extent it was a mistake, and we're seeing some of the consequences of that now. I think, as Sir Philip said recently, there's been a tremendous change the last few years in that, and the international relations team is very aware, I think, of cultural issues, and we've worked closely with them to explore what those possibilities may be. And I think that represents a very significant change for Jersey. It creates some real opportunities for the creative and cultural community in Jersey, but as you suggested, raises a couple of sort of interesting practical issues about how we get that message straight. And there's a few issues on my mind, but one of which is very simply is it a Jersey thing, or would it be something that we did better with the Channel Islands thing? You know, it's normally...
Why do you keep on about it as a nation state? We're not a nation state. What that misbelief is this based upon?
I'm sorry, Mike, you don't think we are a nation state?
No, we're not. We're clearly not.
We're not a sovereign state, you're quite right in that respect. But we do have our own identity, and actually dealing with Rod's point, I think that it is possible to square the circle, because both Jersey and Guernsey have their own different appeals. They have different things to offer. And if you go to the art gallery in Guernsey, you can have a different experience from the one which you get when you go to the museum in Jersey. And those differences, I think, are important and ought not to be forgotten, because I think if you talk to most Jerseymen who have been here for a number of years, they will say that they are different from Guernseymen. So that's one side of the equation. But so far as the international relations are concerned, it is certainly true that we are regarded as Channel Islands. And I think when we are under attack, as we are at the moment, as tax havens, both Jersey and Guernsey, we are much stronger if we can marshal our forces and act together. And actually it's been quite encouraging, I think, to see the chief ministers of both Jersey and Guernsey working together in responding to the criticisms that have been made of us, and I think those responses have been quite successful. we are Channel Islands, and we now have an office in Brussels, which is a Channel Islands office. We will have an office in London, which I hope in 2 or 3 years' time will also be a Channel Islands office. And more, I think we're going to find that our interests in dealing with the outside world come from dealing together as a joint entity. And interestingly, I don't know whether Rod wants to talk about it, but we had a very interesting talk yesterday with some people from Guernsey who have a very exciting scheme under discussion for dealing with a Chinese artist whose name is completely unpronounceable. I'm afraid I can't get it out. But a chap whose stock in trade is dealing with gunpowder. I don't know if anyone has seen any of his artistic works, but they're very exciting to see. And that's a project which could very well be developed as a Channel Islands project. It's very much on the drawing board at the moment. But no, I think we should, so far as we can, work collaboratively with Guernsey in every possible respect, and that must include culture.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any comment they'd like to make from the floor?
Well, sorry, I just wanted to make a very sort of small comment, because in a way here we are at the Skipton Studios, which is all about artists working on their own and their vision and following their sort of dreams and passions. And we've talked a lot about the identity, and in a way that's, although the issue's been linked with Biennale, it's almost, and of course it will be connected, but in a way I think the important thing for the artists here at the moment is to hear about opportunities. I mean, I don't know if this strikes a chord with people sitting around in this circle, but to hear about, you know, the opportunities to young artists and creative people in the island. And I think our duty for people of all ages is to create a really invigorating and challenging and environment with lots of potential to follow their ideas and aspirations here on the island, or if they want to work abroad. But we need to have a really good starting point through the schools, and to make sure that, you know, there are continually exciting new opportunities for everyone. And it is difficult at the moment because, you know, a number of commercial galleries have folded. You know, we've got a dedicated team of in the institutions that work on our behalf. Skipton Open Studios is an example of that. But I think we just can't stop and try and sort of encapsulate anything in one particular way, because everything changes over time. I think we've just got to create an environment which is alive to change, and which really sort of encourages sorts of opportunities linked to the
I mean, what's interesting is that about 15 years ago there was a sort of group of Jersey artists who travelled to Normandy, 3 different cities, and it was a sort of cultural exchange programme, and it felt like being part of sort of Team Jersey, and it maybe it was, I mean, it was a selected thing, so it was in a sense a bit elitist or cliquey. But it still, I think, perhaps was the sort of thing that we could repeat quite successfully. So I mean, that's just one thing that I'd like to say. In terms of the Jeremy Deller thing, I don't see it actually as doing much harm to Jersey at all. And I think, I mean, the media is the worst way to actually get the truth about anything, and I think, in a sense, no publicity, or publicity, even if it's kind of negative in that way, is not a bad thing, and it's probably getting people talking about Jersey and might encourage people to visit, as Rod said. So I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I just question whether, if we were to have a representation at the Venice Biennale, for example, I think we need to be very careful about the sort of art that we show, and it has to be something challenging and contemporary. And I think the important thing is to actually bring on artists that are young and exciting and can actually represent us in those sort of ways. So I think that's all I want to say at the moment.
About care, which is really important, will follow on. And I know I was talking earlier about the British Irish Council that you've just been to. Is it you as well, Rod? Can you say a bit about that?
I have to hand the plaudits to Rob McLaughlin, who at the previous one seeded the concept that Jersey would look at creative industries for the next summit, which is held here in November. And where the benefit of that lies is generally the summit subject seems to be about stuff that everybody kind of knows about and can discuss to some extent. But where we've benefited from this particular Rod's idea is that we don't have creative industries in the way that Ireland does. So Ireland at the moment has Game of Thrones. We know that Scotland has the Edinburgh Festival. We know that Wales has Doctor Who and all these various things. So we would benefit greatly from them coming over and telling us these things or talking to us about them and opening up the discussion. There is no doubt in my mind, and I'm the first one to sort of get engaged with these kind of conversations to talk about the sort of thing Claire's talking about, which is getting more of the artists out there and taking more opportunities to get more art seen by more people. And again, because it just starts people thinking differently about what they can see and what they can do. But this opportunity with the British Irish Council is a bit of a wake-up call, because it means that we can look at some of what we haven't got and begin to learn from those people that have got and just spread it amongst us.
Well, to my utter amazement, I encountered Dopey.
Coming this evening, and especially thank you to the Association of Jersey Architects for inviting me along. My company, C Visual Arts Consulting, are an approved public art advisor to the States of Jersey Planning and Environment Minister under the Percent for Art policy. The company was formed in 2012 in direct response to an increased demand by developers and architects for a professional body capable of providing well-researched, high-impact, community-focused, reasonably priced and culturally relevant art schemes in the public domain. We work exclusively with local artists and craftspeople applying traditional skills and materials to ensure that the expenditure stays within the local economy. In every scheme we propose mentoring and training programs for young artists at Highland School of Art and Design, and wherever practical we seek to engage the wider community within our proposals. Our work is primarily research and design based, and we aim to draw out upon and reflect the island's rich heritage and cultural traditions. But as a company that's interested in cultural innovation, we're predominantly interested in exploring new pathways which lead us to create a highly sophisticated contemporary public realm.